Casey. We're here at Yakima Makerspace in the Woodshop. We're going to be covering basic shop safety, a lot of the tools in the shop that are the big tools that you will be using or can be using in the space. First off, when you come in, since COVID is around, we are going to ask that you wear your masks. Some shop safety stuff that you will want to either have on your person or grab. Pair of safety glasses. We recommend Z87. These are available Harbor Freight, Home Depot, wherever. Wear them at all times when you're in the shop. Once you enter the door, which I did not do. And then as you're using tools, some of them have a high decibel rating or high volume rating. So we do recommend getting some kind of ear protection, whether it's in-ear, the foam earplugs, or an over-the-ear muff like this. Would definitely recommend getting some of these. They do have varieties out there where you can hook your phone up to do Bluetooth, but we would recommend not using those due to being able to hear the machines and hear what you're cutting and other people around you. Also, when you're here, try to use or wear close-fitting clothing. Tie your hair back if you do have long hair or a long beard. Also, remove jewelry. We recommend that, especially chains and necklaces and anything on your hands that could hamper using the material or using tools. So another couple safety things, when you're coming in the shop and you're using any of the big power tools, definitely wear short sleeves. I know I had long sleeves on. It is pretty cold out right now. But when you're in the shop, wear short sleeves, roll them up. And then also open-toed shoes are not allowed. So if you happen to come in heels, peep toes, or any kind of sandals or flip-flops, that is not going to be allowed back in the woodworking shop. Closed-toed shoes only. So when you're in the space, there are some tools that we would recommend you bring yourself. You can sometimes find a tape measure, sometimes not. Definitely recommend having it. I've been in the space for a few years, and sometimes when I'm here, I'm searching for 5-10 minutes for a tape when I could easily have brought my own. Also, definitely recommend bringing a pencil or marking utensil if you're going to be cutting specifics for dimensional lumber or any kind of cuts here. And then also, there are a ton of tools here for you to use, but we do recommend bringing some of your own tools if you have specific requirements for certain jobs. Also, there is a ton of material around. We'll show you. This is a big member storage rack here. Has a bunch of labeled tools or labeled material, as well as some scrap, maybe some scrap in there. And on the right side there's a bunch of sheet goods, and these are all labeled as well. So if you do have a project, please bring in your own materials. We do have some small scraps around, but we don't have enough for very large projects. So a big part of Yakima Makerspace, when you're done using it, please clean up your dust, sawdust, scraps, everything. So here we have our central dust collection system, which allows us to collect from every single tool. Each tool has its own, what's called a blast gate. You're able to open and close it. So when you're using the joiner, for example, right here, you want to have that open and make sure all of the other blast gates are closed. There are blast gates on this side, as well as this side of this main central beam down the shop. So you want to go down, make sure all of these are closed and ready to go. So this dust collection system is normally tucked back a little bit more, but on the back of the motor, there is a little switch, red and yellow switch, that allows you to and turn it off when it's not in use. Also, we would like people to check the dust collection. So just touch the cloth bag down on the bottom. It allows you to see how much dust or chips are in the bag. This is about a third full, so we're good. But if it does get to about halfway full where you are touching and having some resistance, we do recommend that you clean it out. So this is pretty easy to use. There is a little clip here, allows you to unclip it. There's some springs here that allow you to pull the band off. It can be a little difficult pulling the bag off and putting it back on, but just pull this down, this whole cloth bag down, take it outside the back door, and there's a large trash bin out there, and there's a trash key just to the right of the door, hanging there, and that allows you to dump all your garbage, all your sawdust, everything out there, so you don't leave it for someone else to clean up. So it's usually recommended to have 2 people help you replace this. The band goes on the top once you get the cotton bag back in. It's a little difficult, but getting that first in there, that allows you to close and clamp this down. Sometimes you got to fiddle with it and get it in the right position. Close and clamp it down so it holds the bag there. So here's the table saw, probably the scariest tool in the shop. A lot of people don't like using it, but once you know some basic principles and safety features and safety tips, it is one of the easiest tools to use, and you can break down material pretty quickly. So first off, you have the on-off switch. You've got the green on and the red off. The green does have a little black box around it, so you can't touch it, so you can't accidentally turn the thing on. The 2 knobs down here, we've got one in the front that raises and lowers the blade, and then we've got one on the right side that tilts the blade in one direction away from the fence, so you can get any kind of angle cut that you want, and all of those angles are down here. We do recommend that if you're going to be using it for a lot of angle cuts, that you get either digital angle, which allows you to stick it on the blade and measure the angle that you have changed the blade to. So when you're using the table saw, the fence is always going to be on the right side. In very unique situations, you will use it on the left, but always on the right side. The reason for that is if there's any difference in the blade when you're running a piece of material through, if it's on the right side, it will slide through easily and it won't bind and throw the piece back at you or behind you. So when you're adjusting the fence, this little black lever here, you don't need to push it down too hard. If you push it down too hard and the back of the fence comes up, you tightened it quite a bit. So it only needs to be about 2 fingers tight. Up here, you do have a measurement for your sliding your fence, so you can get a nice, clean, and precise cut. We do recommend that before you use the saw, when you adjust the blade up, just take your tape measure and measure between, so you know exactly what it is. Right now I'm cutting about 8 3/8. So right now I'm going to show you the proper way of pushing material through and setting up a cut. First off, we don't usually want our blade that high. We want it about 2 to 3 teeth above your material. So that's a pretty good height for your material, for your blade. The reason why is because if you're pushing material through and you happen to slip, you don't want that blade up really high to cut you all the way through. As well as gripping waste material that could come from using a cut. So when you're setting up a cut, once you have your blade height correct and you have your material, you're going to start the saw. I'm going to show you how I push the material through and my hand positions, so I know exactly where and when to let go. So first off, you're always going to have your left hand pushing against your material, whether it's here or way out here against the fence. Now, when you're pushing against the fence, you don't want to push it so tight that it's hard to push through. You just want to have an even pressure to keep the material there. I usually have my hand underneath, so facing up, palm up, to get the material started. And then when I get closer to the fence, I'll switch over and I have my pointer finger and middle finger, or just my pointer finger on the material, thumb in the back, and then I use my other fingers up against the fence. So when I'm pushing material through, it keeps my hand out of the way, and I don't have any slippage and a possibility of hitting my hand into, or sliding my hand into the blade. Once I'm right about here, about 6 to 8 inches, this is about 8 inches for me, 6 to 8 inches away from the blade, I'll let go with my left hand and continue pushing the material all the way through until my material is past this back little bar on this insert plate. So the reason is if you have your material here and you don't continue pushing it through and you've already cut, this, if you let go and the blade is running, this could push this back into you, into someone behind you, if you're not paying attention. So always, when you're done with cutting your material, always push it past at least the back of the blade, but I recommend at least this back bar. So I'm going to show you how I set up a 7.5 inch cut. So I've measured my material. I know I need it 7.5 inches. And over here, I'm using this gauge. And I've set it roughly at 7.5, tightened it slightly. Now I'm going to come up, use the tape measure to measure it. I am just a hair north of that, which is okay. The other thing, don't ever set metal or leave metal on the table. So now I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to run this through to be able to see everything as I'm running the table saw through. Once I'm done with the cut, I always turn the table saw off. I wait for it to finish spinning, and then I will take my scrap piece, throw that away. So another thing with using a table saw, don't leave your material up against the fence until you're ready to cut. I always have it either on the right side of the fence or over here on this little workstation, so I can prep my cut, and so I don't have it catching anything and it throws the material. So when you're cutting real thin pieces on table saw, somewhere where your fence is close to this insert plate, if it's on the insert plate, you're always going to want to use a push stick. So they're going to be located somewhere close to the table saw, either on the fence or just to the right of it. You're going to push your material through like you normally do, but when you get closer to the end, instead of using your finger to push it through, you're going to keep even pressure with this. Keep pushing through. So another thing with the table saw, it does have a dust collection system in the bottom, and that runs all the way up and over. So when you're using the table saw a lot or at all, always turn that dust collection on. So we'll show you where the dust collection system is. So here you've got this big box. Pull this. You'll be able to look in there. Also, if you happen to want to, you can look down the top of the saw to see if there's a lot of dust or buildup in there. So if there is a lot of dust or buildup, we just recommend grab your hands, grab a little bucket, grab a waste bin, and take that, put it in there, clean it out so the next person can use it fully. So we're going to go over just basic replacing or changing of the blade. Actually, before we even start, we have to remember to always unplug tools when we're going to be changing blades. So there's this little twist lock plug over here. Be able to unplug it and then just feed it back in and twist it back together when you're done. So I'm going to leave this unplugged so we don't have any accidents. So you take the insert off. I usually use a scrap piece of material because this is a self-locking blade. There's this big wrench. It's usually hanging just on the right side of this little wood workstation. Use it, twist towards you, kind of get that nut loosened, and then once you have it loose, you can come in and unscrew the nut. The one thing that I do recommend, do not drop the nut, because you will be cleaning the inside. There is a little flange on the inside. That'll come off as well. Don't lose that, because then again you'll have to clean the underside. And then when you take the blade off, be careful. These are carbide tipped. The carbide is super sharp and brittle. The other thing, don't set the blade on the metal table saw top. These are nylon or Delrin. They're essentially plastic that will allow you can set that on there, or have a piece of wood handy that you can set the blade on so you don't nick or break or damage the teeth. And then when you're putting the blade back on, always have the teeth facing you. Very carefully put it in. Feed it across the nut so it's all nice tight up against the existing flange. The other thing with this, make sure that when you put it on, it doesn't rock like this. Always have it so it's the most contact is up against the blade. So you slide that in and then take your nut. Doesn't really matter which direction. Tighten that back on. And since this is a self-tightening system, all you have to do is take your wrench, just grab the blade lightly, tighten lightly, because as this spins, it spins towards you. And if there's any slack in there when you turn it on, the torque from the motor will actually tighten that nut, and it will fasten the blade enough if there's any discrepancies. So last tip and safety with the table saw. When you're cutting material, you always want to cut material that is longer than it is wide. In this instance, if I'm cutting this, that's a great use of the tool. Again, even though this is demo, I should have pushed it all the way through. So if you're going to cut something like this, chop saw is going to be a little bit better to use, because if you're cutting something like this, if you push a little too much on this, it can bind the blade and it can spin the material and actually shoot it across the room. We actually had that happen here within the last year. Nobody was injured. It wasn't really a big deal, but it did scare the crap out of someone. So last thing, when you're done with the table saw and you're done with your cuts, you're ready to put it up, you've cleaned everything off, just friendly thing, take the blade all the way down, move the fence all the way over so it covers, and lightly lock it down. So next we're going to cover the planer. This one allows you to thickness or get your material to the right thickness that you need it for your project. This is probably one of the noisiest machines in the shop. So as you saw when I was using the table saw, if I was just doing one cut, maybe I wouldn't wear ear protection. But when you're using the joiner and the planer, you're going to want to always wear some kind of ear protection. It is incredibly loud, and I'll show you how loud it is. You can't even talk while it's running. So if you have to yell in a louder voice, or use a voice louder than a normal talking voice, you're always going to want to wear ear protection in the long run. So a few things with the planer. It does put out a lot of chips, so we do have a secondary dust collection system hooked up to it, and we'll show that right now. It runs from the back of the joiner all the way up and into this big 55-gallon barrel. There is a switch on this right side. Then you're able to turn that on, and that acts as a tertiary or a first chip collection, and then all the fine dust comes through the dust collector to the other one over there. You definitely have to make sure when you're using this, have all of the appropriate glass gates open, this one open, and all of the other ones off. The reason is if this one is open and you turn that motor on, that motor is powerful enough that it will blow chips out the bottom here instead of through to the dust collection. So always, when you're using the planer, always have all the other dust collection ports closed. So when using the planer, this raises and lowers the deck, which allows you to get your right thickness. Now, when you're using it, there's two handles. There's a black handle in the front and a black handle in the back here. You're going to want to loosen whenever you're changing your height. And that allows you to easily lower this, and it doesn't strip out the mechanism here if you have these tight. So we're going to drop this down quite a bit. We've got a real thick piece that we're going to run through. So first off, whenever you're going to run material through, you want to measure all the way down the material. You don't want to have a measurement here and a measurement here and then have this really thick here. This is already planed, so I'm going to measure in one spot, but just know if you're running rough stock material, which is not from Home Depot, usually from like a sawyer, someone who cuts material, you'll get varying thicknesses down. So when you're running it through initially, you want to measure at the front, the middle, and the back on both sides of your material, so you know exactly how thick to set your planer for the first run. So this is just shy of 2 inches and 1/8, 2 1/8 inch. So we're going to go ahead and set this. There's a little ruler here. Sometimes you can read it, sometimes not, because it's dusty, so you got to have to wipe it off. But we're right at 2 1/8. So usually what I do is I run it through at the highest height first, see what hits, and then I'll flip my material over and run it through again, just to see if there's any major inconsistencies between both sides. When you're running the material through, you always want to have it at least the length of the bed. So from here to here, it's about 24 inches. Minimum you could do is between the two rollers here. So you can run it as small as 14, maybe even 12 inches, but you do run the risk of your board catching and not going all the way through. Then you have to turn the machine off, lower and raise your bed so you can get your wood out, and then recut. So if you're running just regular stock through, 14 inches to 16, but definitely recommend about 20 to 24 inches minimum to run your stock through. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I run material through and my steps. So I've already set the height with the adjustment here. I'm going to run it through at that 2 1/8. We'll see and hear if it cuts any material off. Remember, always wear ear protection. The right side or left side of the machine has the green and red on-off switch. This is very loud, so we will go ahead and run through. So here's an instance where I did not set this low enough or with enough depth that this would be pulled through. So I'm going to take one full rotation, and that should get me down to my right height. So run through again. If your piece of material does get stuck in the back like that, you can just go ahead and pull it through. Just be careful at where you have your hand placements. But the reason why that did go through, or didn't go all the way through, is because there's a little bit of adjustment that we need to do with this planer. And if that happens, talk to myself, Casey, or Heath, or send an email to Yakima for info@yakimamakerspace.com and let them know that something is up with the planer, describe it a little bit, and then we'll come in and fix it. So as you can see, it didn't run all the way through. Again, that will be taken care of shortly. If you notice on the deck here, there is a lot of chips coming out from the planer. Could be two reasons. One, there could be a blockage here, or we don't even have our dust collection system on, which is the case here. So if there is any issue with the machine, just go ahead. Same thing with the table saw. It is, you can unplug it and then come to the back And this dust collection system, this dust collector will slide off. And if you look in there, it is pretty clean. So the reason why is because we didn't have the dust collection system on it. So a couple of things with the planer. Right up top in bold lettering, it says do not run plywood through planer. The reason is it gets chipped. There's tons of glue in it. Just not good for the machine. And then there's this little metal detector over here that we can pull out, turn on, and check for metal along the wood. Just don't do this, because you'll always think there's metal there, but you're really detecting that. So have your material out in the concrete, run the metal detector over it, make sure there's no screws, nails, staples, whatever. Remember to put metal detector right back where it was. Parting words for the planer. This is one of the best tools in the shop because it allows you to take something really thick and get it down to the right thickness for your project, whether you're making cabinets, whether you're building a bed or bookshelf or whatever. It allows you to bring thicker stock down to the right dimension, and it gives it a fairly clean, smooth surface. You just have to hit with sandpaper, a sander, and then you're good to go.